Hello everyone, and welcome to another week of tea with me, Carolina at Teach Through Play. I have my tea today and I've been curled up here in my warm office. It is raining outside, that lovely sort of soft rain falls on the roof and makes you want to curl up with a good book. So I've been curling up with your questions this week and I'm very excited to answer the question that I have for you this week. This week we have a question from someone named Birgit, who is in Belgium, and she works with a little boy named Adam, who is 3 years old, and Adam happens to do a game that I see a lot with children, so I'm really excited to answer this question because I think it can help lots of you, because I know lots of little boys and little girls who really like to throw stuff. All right, so here's her question. Birgit says, Adam loves playing with toys and games that contain lots of pieces. Often he starts playing calmly and then he starts throwing the pieces across the room. If I ask him to pay attention to me or to stop, he has a hard time doing either one. Where does this strong desire to throw come from, and what can we do to contain his throwing? All right, so Birgit, I think, as I said, this is a great question. One, because it's so applicable to so many children. Typical children love to throw stuff, right? That happens all the time. But also because I think this question really brings us back to the sensory system, which so often is a huge part of what we're doing with any child with a diagnosis. So what I think is important to consider here are three things. Number one, we're going to look at the sensory system and decide, is my child, is Adam doing this action because his body, his sensory body, actually needs that action that he's creating by throwing an object? So it's important for us to observe, is there some component of this that he might actually need for his well-being or for his sensory development? Because if he does, I don't want to just contain it. Sure, I want to make sure that I'm not injuring the objects or people around or, hurting the walls of my house. But it's important to remember that maybe Adam has a need for this sensory input he's receiving while throwing. So that's question number one. Question number two is my child, is Adam doing this for a reaction from me? And question number three is, based on my two observations, how do I decide my response? Okay, so number one, Birgit, in this example, what I hear and what you're telling me is that it sounds to me like Adam really does have a sensory component here, because he starts off playing calmly and then he often starts throwing objects. What I'm noticing is, you said, if I ask him to pay attention to me or to stop, he has a hard time doing so. So that indicates to me that he's probably exclusive. What I mean by that is he's probably not ready to play with you during this time. Potentially what you're seeing here is an exclusive activity that he wants to do all by himself. He found some toys that work for him and he really enjoys throwing the objects. So my guess is there's several different sensory input, versions of sensory input he could be receiving. Number one, there's a lot of input he's receiving in his shoulders, in his elbow, in his wrist. All of the joints that our children use when throwing receive that input. Try it for a while. Throw an object against a wall, throw a ball against a wall, and notice how much and how quickly you start to feel your shoulder, or you start to feel your elbow. And after a while, you kind of want to stop. You don't want to keep doing that forever. So it's a lot of information for your joints in one way. It's also potentially he's getting that auditory input when the object hits the floor or hits the wall. Maybe he's looking for that kind of input as well. There's lots of different options of what he could be gaining here. Maybe his depth perception is still developing and he's practicing by throwing an object at a wall. He's seeing how far away is the wall. Almost like a dolphin would do with their sonar ability to bounce sonar off of objects around them. Maybe his visual sense isn't as developed, and his auditory senses, he's using that to understand the space around him. In this one activity, there are a lot of possibilities of why Adam might be throwing, and why your child, who might be like Adam, is throwing. So it's important to observe that. Is he exclusive? Is he doing this by himself? Maybe he's looking for a sensory kind of input that he actually needs for his development. Second question, is he doing this for a reaction from me? Well, here's what it looks like. He picks up an object, he throws it, and then he looks at you. And then he picks up another object and he throws it, and he looks at you. I've seen it over and over and over and over again. Our kids, because they're really trying to control their world and understand how to be the director of their lives, even at 3, and especially at 3, that's what we're learning. If Adam, or if your child, is throwing an object and then looking at you like, are you gonna do anything? Is this gonna get a big, huge spectacle out of you today? It's important to remember that maybe he's doing it for a sensory component, but also for a reaction from you or from someone else that he has seen give him a reaction in the past. So if you put those two observations together, then we decide how we're going to respond. So one option of response is my child is only doing this for sensory input. And Birgit, in Adam's case, what you've written to me, it sounds like he's doing this for a sensory component. The fact that he's not paying attention to you when you ask him to tells me that he might not be doing it for a reaction. He's just doing it because he likes the sensory input. So if you have a child who's only doing it for sensory and not for a reaction, then what I would do is a couple things. One is I'd give him space to throw. Of course he can throw, and I'd love to give him all the time he needs to throw an object that is safe to throw. So if he's already choosing objects that are small and light and they're not hurting anyone, he's throwing them away from you into his own space, I just leave him to it. If he's throwing an object that maybe is questionable in terms of safety, then I would explain, you know what, Adam, I really want you to throw if you need to, but I'm going to give you some other objects. So you put the hard or sharp-edged objects up, and you replace them with some small stuffed animals, like Beanie Babies used to be great for this, or bean bags, or small little soft rubber balls. Give him something that he can throw that has a similar feel to the objects you've replaced. So that he, even if he isn't excited about the new objects, I think it's really important that you set that limit for his safety, of course. So make sure he has space to throw and soft and safe objects to throw, and then give him space. So that's one way I can support a sensory-seeking child. And number 2, in a sensory-seeking child who's not looking for a reaction, I can offer him the input he's getting from the throwing, and I can give it to him. So maybe not in the moment because he's busy throwing, right? Like we said, maybe he's exclusive and focused on his own activity. I'll give him space. But a little while later, he turns to me and opens the door to interaction. I could offer him some squeezes on those joints, perhaps, or all the way down his arm, or maybe some kind of tapping on the joint or tapping on his arm. Maybe he would like clapping against his hands. Maybe it's the air that he's feeling as he throws. You can experiment, but think, how many different ways could you offer him the sensory input he's getting from the throwing game? If you think it's the sound that he likes, you could tap on the wall for him, again, when he turns to you and opens that door to interaction. So think about it. If you have a sensory-seeking child, I don't want to contain his throwing. I want to give him space so that he has room to do what he needs. I want to trust his body that he's getting the kind of sensory input he already requires. So, second option, I have a sensory-seeking child perhaps, but he's also looking for a reaction from me. So in that case, I'm definitely going to give him space to throw. I'm not going to stop that because there may be that sensory component. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that anything I do when my child throws is not big and reactive. So maybe this is you. I've seen this a million times before. He throws, he looks at you, and you're kind of tired and you're kind of feeling impatient today, and you go, oh gosh, Adam, will you just stop throwing, putting that up, right? And you give some sort of fun, kind of interesting to see reaction. We've all done it. So it's important to observe yourself. Are you giving something that's like a circus, like a show, like something he's really getting a lot out of? And if so, how can you minimize that, right? How can you remember, take a deep breath, take a couple steps away, give yourself some space if you're feeling impatient, or just put on a calm face knowing that he's just trying to manipulate the situation. He's just looking for a way to play, that's all. So when I calmly say, I noticed that you threw that, but you know what? I'm not really sure what you were trying to tell me when you threw. I'm pretty boring, I'm not very exciting, not much happens. But later on, when he comes over and he kisses me, or he talks to me, or he touches my hand, I can give a big circus. If he wants reactions, I will give him reactions, but not when he throws. So it's important to contain your reaction. And if you do need to set a limit, like we said before, if he's throwing a hard object or an unsafe object, of course, set that limit. But can you set the limit without your face being so exciting, right? You could calmly say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put those objects up because those ones aren't safe. And I put them on the shelf or out of the way or into the closet so they're out of the space, and give him an alternative to throw, but he's still not seeing that reaction. So you can help a child who's sensory seeking and reaction seeking at the same time, of course. So I hope these ideas, Birgit, have really helped you. And I know that there's so many children out there who love to throw, or who have a variation on throwing, right? So this applies to your child if he has, if he tends to tap everywhere, or if he likes to move his arms, right? There's so many things that our children do that look like throwing, but could be the same question. Is he seeking a sensory component? What is it that he needs out of this? And how can I make sure that he's getting what he needs? And two, is he looking for a reaction so that I can determine my response? I think it's so important to remember that we observe our children first, then we respond. It's really important to get to know them and know what Adam actually needs before I decide what I do, right? He's my teacher here. So I know this applies to countless children out there just like Adam. I've met many, many, many little boys and little girls and big boys and big girls who love to throw stuff. So I hope this is helpful for all of you who this applies to. And I hope that you have a very wonderful week, as always. And I will be back next Friday with another tea segment so we can sit down, have some tea, and talk about your child. Remember, if you have a question, be sure to ask it. I'll give you the link below that you can click on right now. And you can go to my website and you can ask your own question about your child. I would love, love, love to support you and your specific needs. Wishing you a wonderful week, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.